The security officer at the gate scanned my ID card and frowned. "Lieutenant, this credential has been revoked." I didn't argue. I pulled a different card from my wallet and handed it through the window. His eyes moved down the plastic, and his posture changed instantly. "Major Alexandra Monroe, sorry, ma'am, please proceed." That moment summed up the last decade of my life. 10 years ago, nobody in my family believed I would ever be more than the screw-up middle child. Now? A soldier, an attorney in the Army JAG Corps, and yes, someone with actual rank and respect. I drove past the checkpoint, keeping a straight face while inside I felt the same flicker of satisfaction every time someone realized they'd underestimated me. It wasn't about ego. It was about survival. 10 years ago, when my family threw me out, survival was all I had. Back then I was 23, fresh out of school, and the peacekeeper of the Whitmore family. My older sister Kate was the golden child, the one with perfect grades, polished manners, and a permanent spotlight. My younger sister Sophia was still in high school, too young to realize the house we grew up in ran on competition and favoritism. And then there was me, the dependable one, until I fell in love with the one man my sister had paraded around like he was her trophy. Thomas wasn't looking at her, he was looking at me. And once Kate figured that out, my life in that family was over. I didn't collapse, I enlisted. I pushed myself through deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, then into law school, then into JAG. I built a career while my parents told everyone I was basically dead. 10 years later, I wasn't dead. I was more alive than I had ever been. That's why when the wedding invitation slid under my apartment door, my first instinct was to laugh. 10 years of silence. Not a phone call, not a Christmas card, not a text. Suddenly Kate wanted me at her perfect little wedding. Handwritten note inside, "Family is family." Family is family? That's rich, coming from the woman who gave our parents an ultimatum. It's her or me. They chose her. They always chose her. The irony was almost funny. For a decade, I'd been erased from their photo albums, their holidays, their cocktail parties. Not a single person in the Whitmore household said my name out loud. And now I was supposed to sit in a designer chair at her wedding and pretend it was all water under the bridge? Not happening. This wasn't an invitation, this was a stage. Kate wanted me as her prop, the long-lost sister making a dramatic return to show off how magnanimous the bride was. Too bad for her, the sister she thought she erased didn't just survive, she outranked her. I set the invitation down on my desk and looked around my office. The walls were lined with framed commendations, JAG certificates, and photos from my deployments. On the shelf sat a thick binder stamped Monroe Reed Strategies, the company I built with my husband. Last year we closed a $65 million contract with the Pentagon. We handled defense contractors, corporate crises, political disasters. My name was on all of it. Kate had no idea. My parents had no idea. As far as they knew, I was still the traitor daughter who picked the wrong man and walked away. That thought made me smile. Because the truth was, they hadn't walked me out. They had walked away from me. And now, after 10 years of silence, they wanted me back, not out of love, but out of optics. They wanted the world to believe the Whitmores were a picture-perfect family, united at Kate's glamorous wedding. Good. Let them believe it. I'd show up. And when I did, they would learn exactly what they had thrown away. If you're watching this, I want to know, have you ever been cut off or treated like you didn't exist, only to come back stronger? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and I want to hear your story. And if you enjoy family revenge stories, family drama, and military twists like this one, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. I picked up the invitation again. Heavy ivory cardstock, gold embossed letters. Catherine Whitmore and Jonathan Pierce III request the honor of your presence. The kind of stationery that practically screams old money. The kind of detail my parents loved to brag about. 10 years ago, I would have been intimidated by it. Now, all I could think was, perfect. A fancy hotel, a guest list full of people who live on appearances, and a bride who never imagined her discarded sister might walk through the door in full army dress uniform. I tucked the invitation into my drawer. Not because I needed a reminder, but because sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting. It's showing up. I pulled the drawer open again and ran my finger over the envelope. The cardstock was so heavy it could have doubled as armor. I slid it out and read the line I'd already memorized. Family is family. Kate's handwriting was flawless, as if even her penmanship had grown up with an attitude. That single sentence carried 10 years of arrogance. Family is family except when it wasn't. Except when your parents turned the locks, your sister screamed that you were dead to her, and your name vanished from the holiday table. 10 years of silence, and suddenly I was back in the rotation? Please. I set the invitation flat on my desk and stared at the embossed letters of her name, Catherine Whitmore. It reeked of status. The Whitmores loved their performances, and this was the headliner. My role was supposed to be simple, the discarded daughter who had crawled back, grateful for a seat in the second row, the prop who made the bride look merciful. Not a chance. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't dialed in years. Sophia. My youngest sister. She'd never blocked me, but she'd never used my number either. I hesitated, thumb hovering, then pressed call. Hello? Her voice was thinner than I remembered, like she wasn't sure if she should answer. Sophia, it's Alex. There was a sharp intake of breath, then silence. Finally she whispered, "Oh my God, are you okay?" "I got the invitation," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Yeah," I pushed her to send it. I told her it's been 10 years, too long. That. 10 years, I repeated, my voice hardening. You mean the 10 years nobody said my name, the 10 years I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving, to Christmas, to your graduation. That wasn't my choice, she said quickly. I was 17. I couldn't stop them. I leaned back in my chair. So now it's your choice? You all erased me, and suddenly I'm good enough to decorate her wedding? It's not like that, her tone wavered. She's happy now, Alex. Jonathan has money, a perfect background. She wants to show she can forgive and forget. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Forgive and forget? She exiled me because the man she flashed around as her friend fell in love with me instead of her. She wanted me dead to the family, and Mom and Dad let her have it. Forgive and forget? That's a joke. Alex, please, Sophia begged. I missed you. I swear I did. But they thought it was better if Kate didn't see you. They wanted to protect her feelings. Her feelings? I shot back. I wasn't a reminder, Sophia, I was a scapegoat. They made me vanish to keep her happy. Her silence told me everything. Why now? I asked finally. Why the sudden forgiveness? Sophia's voice dropped to a whisper. Because this time, it matters how it looks. The Pierce family is old money. Jonathan's father is military, the guest list is full of senators and CEOs. Kate wants to look perfect, and nothing says perfect like forgiving her long-lost sister. I clenched the phone tighter. So that's what I am, a PR stunt. Number. You're still my sister. I want you there. Please, Alex. Come. I stared at the ceiling, biting back words that wouldn't help either of us. I'll think about it. When I hung up, I didn't feel relief. I felt the same mix of anger and clarity I had the night I left home. Nothing had changed. Kate was still the star, Mom and Dad were still her producers, and Sophia was still trying to play mediator. The only difference was me. I wasn't a dependent middle child anymore, I wasn't the traitor daughter, I wasn't disposable. The invitation sat on my desk, mocking me with its golden script. It dared me to walk into that ballroom, to let them see what they thought they'd buried. I slid it back into its envelope and tucked it under a stack of case files. My clients included defense contractors, government agencies, even political campaigns. They called me when reputations were collapsing and millions were at stake. My name carried more weight in Washington than Kate's ever would. And she had no clue. None of them did. I opened my laptop and searched for the Jefferson Hotel. Crystal chandeliers, ballrooms dripping in velvet, the kind of place where my parents thrived. A perfect setting for Kate's grand performance. They thought I'd play along, they thought I'd smile, nod, and vanish again once the champagne ran out. I closed the screen and leaned back in my chair. If they wanted me on stage, I'd give them a performance they'd never forget. The memory never waited for an invitation. It showed up the second I closed my eyes, 10 years collapsing into one night. We'd been at the house in Arlington. Dad had grilled steaks, Mom set the table with her usual polished silver, and Kate had walked in with Thomas like she was debuting a prize. He was fresh out of flight school, tall, confident, polite. Everyone admired him. But when he glanced my way across the table, I knew instantly Kate's plan wasn't working. I kept my mouth shut. I told myself it was nothing, just a look, just conversation. But a week later he called. Then coffee turned into dinner, and before long, I was in too deep to pretend. When Kate found out, it detonated. She stormed into the living room one night, voice so sharp it could have cracked glass. "You knew I liked him, Alex. You knew, and you stole him anyway. He never belonged to you," I said, shaking. "You introduced him as a friend, that's all he was to you." "Liar," she spat. "You've always been jealous, always trying to take what's mine because you can't stand being in my shadow." Mom tried to step between us, murmuring, "Girls, please," but Kate cut her off like a blade. "It's her or me," she snapped, turning to our parents. "If you want me in this family," she goes, "I won't share a roof with a traitor." Now. The silence that followed was worse than her shouting. Dad stared at his whiskey glass, jaw tight but unmoving. Mom's hands trembled around the pearls at her neck. Nobody defended me. Nobody told her she was being ridiculous. Finally, Mom whispered, "Alexandra, maybe it would be best if you stayed away for a while. Let things cool down." "A while." That's what she said. Kate folded her arms, satisfied, as if she'd won a trial. Sophia stood frozen near the staircase, just 17, her face pale and stunned. "You're serious," I said, looking between them. "You're letting her erase me." Dad finally spoke, his voice low. "It's for the peace of the family." "The peace of the family," I repeated. "Got it." I left that night with nothing but a duffel bag. I didn't come back for birthdays, or Christmas, or graduations. They didn't ask me to. The locks were changed within a week, as if to underline the point. For Kate, it was victory. For me, it was exile. But exile has a funny way of turning into freedom. The first year was brutal. Rent in a one-bedroom apartment, shifts that barely covered groceries, weekends buried in textbooks while Thomas flew training missions. But every insult, every silence from my parents hardened into fuel, every deployment sharpened me, every court case built my confidence. Every step forward was another nail in the coffin of the family who thought I'd stay broken. Still, that night never lost its edge. The moment Mom said a while. The moment Dad picked peace over me. The moment my older sister decided she had the right to dictate my life and my parents handed her the power to do it. That was the night my family broke. And 10 years later, I was still the one who carried the memory. Not them. They'd buried it under fundraisers, promotions, photo ops, and staged smiles. I'd carried it into war zones, into courtrooms, into midnight strategy sessions at my own firm. It never left me. The invitation on my desk wasn't a reminder of reconciliation. It was proof they thought the slate was clean. That I'd just reappear, docile and grateful, for Kate's big day. I leaned forward, elbows on the desk, staring at the envelope. 10 years ago I was erased by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. 10 years later, they wanted me back for decoration. They were going to learn that the daughter they disowned wasn't just alive, she was stronger than all of them put together. I didn't waste those 10 years. The Whitmores thought they'd shut a door, but what they really did was shove me onto a different path. It was rough at first, no doubt. I started with nothing but my army paycheck, a beat-up Honda, and a stubborn streak that could bend steel. Afghanistan was my first deployment. Long days, longer nights, endless files on rules of engagement and soldiers in trouble. I wasn't the glamorous kind of soldier you see in recruiting ads. I was the one buried in paperwork at 2 in the morning, making sure the right people didn't get railroaded. It wasn't flashy, but it mattered. And it earned me respect, one hard case at a time. Iraq came next. Different country, same grind. I wrote legal briefs in tents while sand blew through every crack in the walls. I learned how to argue with commanders who outranked me by 2 decades. I learned how to make the law bend without breaking. And somewhere between Baghdad and Kabul, I realized I was good at this. Not just good, built for it. While Kate was racking up promotions at a corporate law firm courtesy of Dad's connections, I was earning mine in places where a mistake meant lives, not billable hours. The contrast never stopped amusing me. By the time I hit 30, I'd pinned on major. Not bad for someone her family labeled a disgrace. That little gold oak leaf on my shoulder? It meant I'd made it further in the army than Dad ever thought possible. The same man who told me, "You're not cut out for this," when I enlisted had to watch from a distance as I proved him wrong. And then there was Thomas. While I was writing legal opinions, he was flying Black Hawks. Deployment after deployment, we managed to keep each other afloat. He knew what it felt like to be underestimated. He also knew how to laugh about it. Nights in crappy apartments eating takeout, he'd grin and say, "If your sister could see you now." She couldn't. Because they didn't want to. When we finally came home for good, we made a decision: build something that didn't depend on anyone's approval. Monroe Reed Strategies started with 2 laptops, a folding table, and more caffeine than the human body should hold. At first it was defense contractors who needed help cleaning up procurement messes, then a congressional campaign on the ropes. Then a scandal at a tech firm tied to military contracts. We didn't just survive, we thrived. 1 client turned into 5, 5 turned into 50. Last year alone, our firm closed $65 million in Pentagon work. Every time a contract landed, I thought of the night my parents told me to leave. Every signature on every deal was another reminder that being cut off didn't kill me. It built me. And yet, none of it made the sting of silence disappear. 10 years, no phone calls, no "how are you," no "we're proud of you anyway," just blank space where a family was supposed to be. I kept track of them anyway. Don't ask me why. Habit, maybe. Dad retired and burned through money at casinos. Mom kept her nonprofit alive by cozying up to donors she barely liked. Kate turned herself into the star of a glossy law firm brochure, her picture next to words like integrity and dedication. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so bitter. Meanwhile, Sophia built her own life in Manhattan. She had a husband, a condo, a job in PR. Out of all of them, she was the only one who ever wavered. She didn't call, but she didn't block me either. A coward's compromise. I didn't hate them, not even Kate. Hate would have meant I still cared enough to burn energy on it. What I felt was sharper, indifference edged with determination. And that's why the invitation was so absurd. They didn't know me anymore. Not the woman who could shut down a hostile colonel in a briefing, not the one who built a business from scratch, not the one whose name passed across Pentagon desks. They wanted the old Alex. The erased Alex. The one who would sit quietly, smile for the camera, and disappear once the cake was cut. That Alex didn't exist anymore. I traced the outline of the invitation one more time, my thumb pressing against the raised lettering. Kate could dress it up however she wanted. Family is family, forgiveness, fresh starts. Underneath it all, it was still the same demand she'd made 10 years earlier, her or me. The difference now was that I didn't need to ask anyone's permission to answer. The phone lit up with her name again 2 days later. This time I answered before it could ring twice. "Alex," she said quickly, like she was afraid I'd hang up, "please don't shut me out." I leaned back in my chair. Funny. That's exactly what the family did to me. I was a kid, Sophia said, her words tumbling over each other. I didn't know how to fight them. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I stayed quiet long enough for her to fill the silence. "I missed you," she added, voice dropping. "Every holiday, every birthday, I wanted to call, I didn't know if you'd pick up." "That's the point," I told her. "You never even tried. You all made your choice." "Actions," she sniffed like she might cry, and I hated that I still cared. "This wedding, it's not about making Kate look generous. I want you there because you're my sister." I don't care what they think. I laughed, but it came out bitter. You don't care what they think? Come on, Sophia, you're a Whitmore, caring what people think is the family sport. Alex, please, things are different now. They're not different, I snapped. Mom still clutches her pearls every time Kate raises her voice. Dad still picks silence over honesty. And Kate? She's still running the entire household like it's her personal kingdom. Sophia hesitated, then asked softly. And what about you? Are you any different? I glanced at the framed commendation on the wall behind me, the gold oak leaf pinned neatly to my uniform hanging on the rack. Yeah, I said finally. I'm not begging anyone to keep me anymore. The line stayed quiet long enough that I thought she'd hung up. Then she whispered, I just don't want to lose both of you. You already did, I answered, steady but not cruel. You just didn't notice. The silence stretched again until I ended the call. I tossed the phone onto my desk and exhaled hard. My hands were shaking, not from regret but from the weight of finally saying it out loud. 10 years of exile wasn't an accident, it was a decision, signed and sealed by the people who shared my last name. The invitation wasn't a peace offering. It was a stage direction. Kate wanted the perfect image. The estranged sister welcomed back, the family united, the bride glowing with forgiveness. And Sophia wanted to believe it was genuine, because believing otherwise meant admitting our parents sacrificed one daughter for the other. I stood, pacing my office. The wedding wasn't about reconciliation, it was about control. They wanted me back under their roof, smiling for their friends, proving to the world that the Whitmores didn't have cracks. What they didn't understand was that the cracks had become canyons, and I had no intention of filling them in for free. The phone buzzed again with a new message from Sophia. Please come. Not for them. For me. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she was just another part of the performance. Either way, it didn't matter. Because I already knew I was going. I called Marcus, the investigator I trusted with everything from background checks on contractors to quiet fact-finding runs for nervous clients. He picked up on the first ring. You sound like you're about to ruin someone's week, he said. Not ruin, I answered. Just prepare. I gave him the name, Jonathan Pierce III. Old money, shiny resume, perfect on paper. Marcus chuckled. That family's been in banking since before anyone in DC could spell the word. You want the quick version or the full workup? Full, I said. Every skeleton, every clause, every dollar. And I want it clean. He promised to get back to me in a week. I knew he'd deliver in 3 days. While he dug, I did my own research. The Pierce family plastered magazines with yacht photos and charity events. Jonathan smiled stiffly in every shot, standing next to senators, judges, even a few generals. Exactly the kind of image Kate loved to orbit. But perfect families rarely stay perfect under pressure. Marcus called on the 4th night. You were right to check. They don't just have skeletons, they've got a whole graveyard. He laid it out, a trust fund stacked with millions, but tied to a morality clause. One scandal, one hint of impropriety, and Jonathan lost access. His father, Colonel Pierce, had written it that way on purpose. The family had too many near scandals in the past, and they wanted the air squeaky clean. So if Kate ever drags him into drama, I started. He's done, Marcus finished. Inheritance gone, career clipped. Daddy dearest makes sure of it. I sat back, absorbing the details. What about Jonathan himself? Marcus hesitated. Technically, he's clean. But there's a paper trail around his banking work that looks flexible. Not illegal. Not yet. But if it leaked? Ugly. Send me everything, I said. An hour later, a neat dossier landed in my inbox. I flipped through it slowly, page by page. Photos of fundraisers, a breakdown of assets, copies of filings, and tucked in the back, 3 clipped articles about regulatory investigations that somehow never went anywhere. I didn't need to wave any of this around. I didn't even want to. But leverage isn't about use, it's about knowing you could. I closed the folder and poured a drink. For 10 years, my family had erased me. Now, the same family wanted me back in the room with people who cared about appearances more than reality. If they thought I'd walk in quietly, they hadn't been paying attention. Thomas leaned on the doorway, watching me. "You're working a case, aren't you?" "Not a case," I said, holding up the folder. "Insurance." He crossed the room and sat across from me. "You don't owe them anything, you know that, right?" "I know," I said. "But this isn't about owing them, it's about reminding them." He shook his head, half smiling. "You're terrifying when you get like this." "I learned from the best," I said, sliding the file closed. The truth was, I didn't need dirt on the Pierces to walk into that ballroom. My uniform, my rank, my company's record, that was enough. But it didn't hurt to know exactly how fragile their perfect image really was. The more I read, the more obvious it became. Kate hadn't invited me for reconciliation. She'd invited me because Jonathan wanted optics. He wanted to marry into a family that looked whole, not one with a missing daughter. Bringing me back was a marketing move. Too bad for him, marketing only works if the product matches the ad. I filed the dossier away, not because I planned to use it, but because I liked the weight of it on my shelf. It reminded me of who I'd become, someone who never walked into a fight blind. The next morning, I buttoned my uniform jacket and looked in the mirror. 10 years ago, Kate had called me a traitor. 10 years later, I was Major Alexandra Monroe, JAG officer, business owner, and the one person in that wedding hall they couldn't afford to underestimate. And if they tried? I was ready. I sat at the kitchen table with the invitation in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. The envelope looked out of place next to my husband's flight helmet resting on the counter. Thomas came in, still in his t-shirt, hair messy from the morning run. He spotted the card and raised an eyebrow. "You're still staring at it?" he asked. "I'm deciding if I should burn it or frame it," I said. He laughed, poured himself coffee, and leaned against the counter. "You don't have to go, Alex, you know that." "I know." I turned the card over in my hand. "But if I don't, she wins again. She gets to tell everyone I'm too bitter, too small, too weak to show up. If I go, she doesn't control the narrative anymore. That." Thomas studied me quietly before saying, "You've already won, look around, you've built a career, a company, a life, you don't need their approval." "This isn't about approval," I said, sharper than I meant to. "It's about showing them what they lost. They wanted me erased, but I'm not a ghost. I exist. And I've done more than they ever expected." He set his mug down and walked over, resting his hands on my shoulders. "Then go. But go for you, not for them. If you walk into that room, do it on your terms." I looked up at him. "On my terms," I repeated. That night I opened the closet and pulled out my army dress uniform. The dark blue coat, the polished buttons, the oak leaf insignia gleaming on my shoulder. I brushed off the jacket slowly, remembering every moment it represented cases won, soldiers defended, rules argued, and years of work nobody in my family ever bothered to notice. I set it on the hanger where the light caught the shine just right. There it was. The only outfit that mattered. I thought about the look on Kate's face when she saw me walk in wearing it. She expected me in some borrowed cocktail dress, tucked in the corner, invisible until the photographer wanted a family picture. Instead, she'd get Major Alexandra Monroe standing in uniform, proof of every choice she thought would ruin me. I sat back on the bed, staring at the jacket. For a moment, the weight of it pressed down harder than I expected. I wasn't just going to a wedding, I was walking back into the lion's den, surrounded by people who'd rather I stayed erased. Thomas came in and saw the uniform laid out. "You're really doing it." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm going." "Then do it proud," he said. "Not proud for them, proud for you." I nodded, gripping the edge of the bed. My heart raced, not with fear but with anticipation. 10 years of silence had led to this decision, and I wasn't going to shrink from it. I hung the uniform back carefully and pulled the envelope out of the drawer one last time. The invitation hadn't changed. Still ivory, still gold lettering, still Kate's handwriting, claiming family is family. But now it didn't sting, it just felt like a challenge. I slid it back into its sleeve and dropped it into my bag. This time, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but as proof of what I was about to face head-on. The choice was made. I was going. And I would walk into that ballroom exactly the way they least expected, undeniable, unshakable, and completely on my terms. The Jefferson Hotel looked exactly like the kind of place my parents adored: grand chandeliers, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, and staff trained to smile with the kind of perfection that costs money. I handed the valet my keys and stepped onto the red-carpeted entrance, my uniform coat buttoned tight, medals aligned with regulation precision. Inside, the lobby buzzed with chatter. Women in designer gowns laughed over champagne flutes, men in tuxedos adjusted their cufflinks like they were on display at a showroom. The instant I walked through the door, the tone shifted. Conversations slowed, eyes slid toward me, and the hum of the crowd thinned out like air leaking from a balloon. A man in a tailored suit glanced at my uniform and gave a respectful nod. His wife tugged his arm, whispering something I couldn't catch. Guests didn't know what to make of me. Was I part of the family, or was I here on official business? I spotted Sophia near the bar. Her eyes went wide the moment she saw me, then softened into something that almost looked like relief. She hurried over, heels clicking against the marble, and grabbed my hand. "You came," she said, a little breathless. "I said I would," I answered evenly. Her eyes ran over the uniform. "You look incredible." I shrugged. "It's just the truth." Her smile faltered as her gaze flicked to the staircase. My mother was there, pearls at her throat, her smile fixed like it had been painted on. Beside her, my father's face flushed red, whether from whiskey or shock, I couldn't tell. They didn't move toward me. They just stared, like I'd materialized from a grave. "Major Monroe," a voice called. I turned to see Jonathan Pierce, the groom, walking toward me with a grin that was just a little too polished. His suit fit like it had been tailored by someone who charged more than most people's rent. He extended his hand. "Kate said you might show up," he said. "Clearly she undersold it," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. He chuckled, though his eyes flickered with unease. "Well, today's about new beginnings. I hope you'll keep that in mind." "This." Before I could answer, my mother's voice sliced across the room. "Alexandra." She approached slowly, her chin lifted, her expression tight but carefully arranged. "You look, well, Washington must be treating you kindly." "It does," I said, letting the words hang. My father appeared behind her, his voice booming louder than necessary. Well, the prodigal daughter returns." I smiled faintly. "Funny, I don't recall leaving voluntarily." "Well," the air thickened, every guest within earshot straining to listen without appearing obvious. Sophia shifted nervously beside me, but I stayed still, calm, steady in my uniform. Then, from the top of the sweeping staircase, Kate appeared. White silk clung to her frame, bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. She froze halfway down, eyes locked on me, her face a mix of shock and fury. Slowly, deliberately, she descended, each step measured like choreography. When she reached the floor, we stood face to face for the first time in a decade. "Alex," she whispered, her voice tight. "Kate," I said, my tone steady. "You look different." "I am different." She swallowed hard, forcing a brittle smile. "Thank you for coming." I tilted my head. "Wouldn't miss it." The tension was so thick I could feel the whole room holding its breath. Guests leaned subtly closer, pretending to sip their drinks while hanging on every word. My mother adjusted her pearls again, my father tugged his jacket straight, and Jonathan cleared his throat like he was desperate to break the silence. But I didn't move. I wanted them to feel the weight of my presence, to understand that after 10 years of silence, the daughter they disowned hadn't just walked back into their lives. She had marched in on her own terms, in the one uniform they could never ignore. My mother reached me first. She kept her smile stretched, the kind of smile she used at charity galas when she wanted donors to believe everything was perfect. Up close, though, her eyes betrayed the strain. "Alexandra," she said again, this time softer, as though repeating my full name might erase the last 10 years. It's been so long. 10 years, I corrected. She paused, pearls between her fingers. Yes, well, you look strong, the army has been good for you. It has, I said. It gave me structure. Purpose. Things you never thought I'd find. Her lips twitched, but she held the smile. Dad stepped in, already flushed. His handshake was a little too firm, his tone louder than the room required. Major, huh? Who would have guessed? The kid we thought couldn't handle conflict ends up in JAG. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't think handling conflict was ever my weakness, Dad. His grin faltered. A ripple of chuckles passed through nearby guests who were pretending not to listen. He adjusted his jacket again, trying to reclaim control. Mom gave him a warning glance before leaning closer to me. This is Kate's special day. Let's not turn it into drama. Drama? I echoed. Funny word choice. Considering what you called me when you changed the locks. The color drained from her face, but before she could answer, Dad chimed in again, his voice stiff. You were young, mistakes were made on all sides. What matters now is we put it behind us. I held his gaze. You mean pretend it never happened? He shifted uncomfortably, but I didn't let the silence save him. You didn't just cut me off, Dad, you let her dictate the rules, and you followed them. Don't call that peacekeeping, call it what it was, surrender. His jaw tightened. A couple standing nearby suddenly discovered an urgent need to refresh their drinks. Mom cleared her throat, regaining her polished tone. Alexandra, let's remember where we are. Important people are watching. You know. That's the only thing you've ever cared about, I said, calm but sharp. Not the truth, not fairness, just appearances. The words landed heavier than I expected. For a moment, the mask slipped and I saw the exhaustion in her face, the years of keeping Kate elevated and me erased. Sophia stepped closer, trying to soften the edges. Maybe we should all just... But Dad cut her off. This isn't the place. I straightened my uniform, letting the silence stretch until it snapped. For once, I disagree. This is exactly the place. Because you can't hide behind locked doors or whispered excuses here. Everyone's watching. Mom's smile flickered like a dying bulb, but she forced it back on. You always did have a way with words. I learned it in courtrooms, I replied. Places where words actually matter. The air between us thickened. My parents stood there, two pillars of a family that had collapsed the moment they chose convenience over me. They wanted control, but I wasn't 17 anymore, begging for their approval. I was Major Alexandra Monroe, standing in front of them with nothing to apologize for. And they knew it. Kate finally broke the standoff. She stepped closer, bouquet still in her hands, her white dress swishing against the marble. Guests shifted aside, forming an unspoken circle around us. Her face was tight, the practiced bridal glow gone. What are you doing here, Alex? She asked, low enough that only a few nearby could hear. I looked her dead in the eye. I was invited. Remember? Or did Sophia have to twist your arm? Her jaw clenched. This is my day. You've had 10 years to build whatever life you wanted. Why show up now? To ruin mine? I let out a laugh that made her flinch. Ruin yours? You already tried to ruin mine. You told Mom and Dad to erase me. And they did. You got exactly what you wanted. Hidden for. Kate's hand trembled around the bouquet. You betrayed me. He never belonged to you, Kate. I shot back. Thomas was never yours to claim. You paraded him around one afternoon like he was a trophy. That's it. You wanted him, but he chose me. And you couldn't stand losing. She hissed under her breath, you took him because you couldn't stand me being happy. I leaned in just enough for her to see the calm in my eyes. No, Kate. I built my own happiness while you were still trying to live off Mom and Dad's approval. Gasps fluttered through the guests close enough to catch my words. She stiffened, forcing her chin higher, trying to keep her composure. Don't you dare talk to me like that in front of these people, she snapped. Why not? I said evenly. You've been talking about me for 10 years in front of everyone else. Or should I say not talking because pretending I didn't exist was easier for you? 2. Her face burned red, the perfect bride mask cracking inch by inch. You don't belong here, she whispered harshly. Really? I adjusted my uniform jacket, letting the metals catch the chandelier light. Looks to me like I belong just fine. Her eyes darted to the crowd, aware of every pair of ears tuned in. She tried to regain control. Fine, you want to stand here and embarrass yourself? Go ahead. But don't think you can hijack my wedding for your little performance. Do you? I tilted my head slightly. Performance? Kate, that's your specialty. Always has been. You wanted me here so you could play the role of the gracious sister forgiving the family disgrace. But the problem is, I'm not disgraced. I'm standing right here, and I don't need your forgiveness. The words cut sharper than I expected. She blinked fast, bouquet shaking harder now, knuckles white around the stems. I didn't push further, I didn't have to. The point had landed, and she knew it. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Jonathan cleared his throat behind her, trying to shift attention back. But the damage was done. The bride and the sister she erased stood face to face, no apologies exchanged, no smiles for the photographers. And for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't the one on the defensive. Jonathan finally stepped forward, slipping past the whispering guests. His smile was polite, but the tightness around his jaw gave him away. He looked between Kate and me like he'd walked into a courtroom without knowing the charges. So, he said, keeping his voice low but firm, someone want to explain what's going on? Kate forced a laugh that sounded nothing like joy. Nothing. Just sisters catching up. I met his eyes and shook my head. Not quite. He studied me more closely. You're Alexandra, right? The one they... He stopped himself, realizing half the room was still hanging on every word. Then, quieter. The one they don't talk about. Correct, I said. The family ghost. Except I'm not dead, and I've done a few things in the last decade. Kate snapped, Jonathan, don't indulge this. She showed up uninvited just to. I cut her off, my voice calm but louder than hers. I didn't crash anything, I was invited. I kept the card if you'd like proof. Jonathan frowned, his eyes flicked to Kate, then back to me. Then why does it feel like I'm hearing half a story? Because you are, I said. The guests closest to us leaned in, pretending to adjust their drinks. The tension rolled across the ballroom like thunder. Jonathan squared his shoulders, the perfect groom, trying to reassert control. Fine. Who exactly are you, Alexandra? Because all I've heard is fragments. Whispers. None of it adds up. I stood straighter, letting my voice carry just enough to be heard without shouting. I am Major Alexandra Monroe, JAG Corps, United States Army. I co-founded Monroe Reed Strategies with my husband, Captain Thomas Reed. Last fiscal year, we closed $65 million in Pentagon contracts. The words hung in the air, heavier than the chandelier above us. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone near the bar muttered, 65 million? Another whispered, she's Army? Jonathan blinked, caught between disbelief and the need to stay composed. You're serious, Hef. I handed him a card from my clutch, the same card I give senators, contractors, and generals. He looked at it, and his smile faltered for the first time all evening. Behind him, Kate whispered fiercely, she's exaggerating. She's always been dramatic. I raised my voice just enough for both of them to hear. Nothing exaggerated. Public record, actually. Check the contract listings if you're curious. The murmurs grew louder. Guests weren't pretending anymore, they were openly listening. The bride, the groom, the estranged sister in uniform, it was better entertainment than any band they could have hired. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably. Why didn't anyone tell me this? Kate's face flushed, bouquet trembling in her hands. Because it doesn't matter, she's here to make a scene, this is supposed to be about us. I held Jonathan's gaze. You wanted optics. You wanted the perfect family to marry into. And they sold you the edited version, where I don't exist. But here I am. Laos. He didn't answer right away. His silence said more than words could. The groom, the man of pedigree and old money, suddenly looked like he wasn't sure which story he'd bought into. Kate turned to him desperately. Don't listen to her. She's twisting everything. I cut in once more, voice steady. I don't need to twist anything, the truth speaks for itself. And it did, judging by the stunned faces around us. The commotion hadn't gone unnoticed. From the far side of the ballroom, an older man in full dress uniform began making his way through the crowd. His presence alone carried weight, broad-shouldered, metals glinting, the kind of bearing you don't mistake for anyone but a career officer. Conversations hushed as he approached. Jonathan, the man said as he reached us, his tone both warm and commanding. Introduce me to your sister-in-law. Kate stiffened, bouquet pressed so tightly against her chest the flowers bent. Of course, she said quickly, voice brittle. Colonel, this is my sister, Alexandra. He turned to me, eyes narrowing with recognition. Monroe. He said slowly. You're Major Alexandra Monroe, aren't you? I straightened, meeting his gaze. Yes, sir. He nodded once, firmly. I thought so. You were the JAG officer on the Titan Systems investigation. That was a damn mess until you got involved. The room seemed to exhale all at once. Guests who'd been whispering fell silent. Even Jonathan blinked in surprise, his polished demeanor cracking as he looked between me and his father. Kate's face drained of color. Titan Systems? She repeated weakly. The colonel ignored her. He extended his hand, his grip steady and deliberate. It's an honor, Major. That case had half of Washington tied in knots. You managed to cut through it and keep the whole program from collapsing. I read your findings myself. Just doing my job, I replied evenly, though I let the words carry. He studied me for another moment before addressing the room, his voice carrying the authority of decades in uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, this woman saved millions of taxpayer dollars and held a defense contractor accountable when no one else could. That's service worth recognizing. Murmurs surged through the crowd again, but this time the tone had shifted. It wasn't gossip anymore, it was respect. Guests leaned toward me with curious eyes, admiration in their voices. Someone near the front clapped once, hesitated, then a few more joined in. The sound wasn't thunderous, but it was enough. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably beside Kate, clearly realizing the narrative he'd been sold about me didn't match the truth standing in front of him. The colonel looked back at his son. You didn't tell me your fiancée's sister was Major Monroe. Jonathan stammered. I didn't know. Kate's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. The colonel turned back to me. Major, I'd like to speak with you after the reception. The Pierce Foundation works closely with several defense initiatives, and frankly, we could use your expertise. I gave a polite nod. I'd be happy to hear more, sir. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother clutch her pearls so tightly it looked painful. My father's face was red, not from whiskey this time, but from the realization that his erased daughter was being publicly praised by one of the most respected men in the room. Kate's bouquet shook visibly now, her carefully constructed wedding day unraveling in front of her. Guests whispered openly, the words Major Monroe spreading across the ballroom like a current. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth had been laid bare, not by me, but by someone whose word carried far more weight than Kate's slander ever had. For the first time all evening, the balance of power shifted completely. I wasn't the forgotten sister anymore. I was the one commanding the room. The applause tapered into murmurs, but the damage was permanent. The Whitmores were exposed, not by scandal, but by the simple fact that the daughter they erased stood taller than they ever expected. Mom was the first to act. She glided toward me, her smile stretched thin like a mask about to crack. Alexandra, darling, she said loudly enough for the crowd to hear, we've missed you so much, haven't we, Richard? Dad's head snapped up. Of course, he said quickly, though the words tasted like ash even from his mouth. Always proud. I didn't bother to smile. Funny. Proud families usually don't change the locks on their kids. The crowd wrestled again. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, others leaned in closer, delighted by the tension. Kate spun toward our parents, her voice sharp. Do something, this is my wedding. Mom hissed under her breath, keep your voice down, Catherine. But it was too late. The image Kate had spent months curating was unraveling thread by thread. Guests weren't whispering about her dress or the flowers anymore, they were whispering about me. Jonathan tugged at his cufflinks, looking like he wanted to sink into the floor. He gave me a tight smile, then turned to Kate. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Her eyes flashed. Because it wasn't relevant. It seems relevant now, he said, his voice clipped. Kate's face burned, she looked at me with pure fury, her jaw clenched so hard I thought she might crack a tooth. You couldn't just stay away, could you? You had to make it about you. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I didn't make it about me, Kate. You did, the moment you invited me to stand here as your prop. You wanted forgiveness as a prop. You wanted me as a prop. But here's the problem, you don't get to write my role anymore. Her bouquet shook in her hands, she finally dropped it onto the table with a thud, petals scattering across the cloth. Gasps rippled through the room. Sophia rushed forward, her voice breaking. Stop it. Just stop. This isn't what I wanted. She turned to me, eyes wide and pleading. Alex, I just wanted you back, I swear that's all I wanted. I softened, just slightly. Then why now? Why only when it's convenient? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Because I was scared. I didn't want to lose both of you. I thought maybe if you came, something would change. I sighed, steadying my voice. Sophia, I love you. But don't confuse wanting me back with wanting me as a talking point. If you want me, you call because you miss me. Not because you finally realized I make for a better headline than an empty chair. Her lip trembled, and she nodded, understanding more than she wanted to admit. Behind us, Dad barked, that's enough, this family needs to control itself. I turned to him. You've been saying that for 10 years. Controlling, not fixing. And look where it's gotten you. The words landed hard. His mouth opened, but no defense came out. Colonel Pierce stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Richard, Margaret. You don't control service, you don't control rank, and you certainly don't control truth. Major Monroe earned her place, and nothing you say tonight changes that. The silence that followed was deafening. Guests shifted uncomfortably, then one by one began to drift away from Kate and Jonathan, drawn instead into small clusters murmuring my name. The social gravity of the room had shifted, and everyone knew it. Kate stood frozen, mascara smudging at the corners of her eyes. Jonathan kept his gaze fixed on the floor, realizing the perfect optics he'd paid for had just exploded. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The fallout was already complete. Sophia touched my arm gently, her voice trembling. I don't care what anyone else thinks, I want to know you, the real you. Please, don't shut me out. I met her eyes. Then prove it. Call me because you want your sister, not because you want your story to look better. She nodded, tears spilling faster. The ballroom felt heavier somehow, like every lie told in that family had been dragged into the open at once. And for the first time in 10 years, I was standing in the center of it without shame, without apology, and without fear. I walked out of the Jefferson Hotel just past midnight, the marble steps glowing under the street lamps. The cool air hit me like a reset button, clearing out the leftover perfume, champagne, and whispers that had clung to the ballroom. I paused at the curb, straightening my uniform coat one last time before handing the valet stub to the young man who nearly snapped to attention when he read my name tag. Inside, the wedding would keep limping forward. The band would play, guests would murmur, and Kate would force a smile through gritted teeth. But I didn't need to be there for any of it. The point had already been made. For 10 years, they'd erased me. Tonight, they couldn't ignore me even if they tried. Not because I shouted, not because I threw a scene, but because the truth stood taller than their carefully staged lies. I slid into my car, the leather seat familiar, steadying. Thomas glanced over from the driver's side. You all right? Better than all right, I said, fastening the belt. They finally saw me. He grinned. Yeah, they did. The whole damn room saw you. Line. As we pulled into the city traffic, I thought about Sophia. The way her tears smudged her mascara, the way her hand shook when she promised she wanted me back for real. Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't. Time would tell. But for the first time in years, I wasn't clinging to the hope of their approval. I didn't need them, I never had. What I had was a career I built with my own hands, a marriage that stood the tests Kate swore it wouldn't survive, and a record of service in uniform that no one in that family could ever match. When the Whitmores chose Kate over me, they thought they'd rid themselves of a problem. What they really did was set me free. Free to fight, free to rise, free to prove them wrong without ever saying a word. And that was the real revenge. Not yelling. Not pointing fingers. Just showing up 10 years later and letting them choke on the sight of what they had thrown away. Back at home, I hung my dress uniform carefully in the closet. The metals clinked softly as I set them in place. My reflection in the mirror caught me for a second steady, composed, unbroken. For years, I carried the weight of their silence like a chain. Tonight, I set it down. Family isn't always the people who share your name. Sometimes family is the ones who stand with you when you're at your lowest, the ones who don't flinch when life gets ugly. I found mine in the army, in my husband, in the people who saw me for what I could do instead of who I disappointed. That's the truth I walked into that ballroom with. And that's the truth I walked out carrying higher than ever. So here's the message: if someone cuts you off, erases you, makes you feel disposable, don't waste your life begging them to take you back. Build yourself until they can't ignore you. Let your success be the silence breaker. Because one day, when they're forced to face you, the revenge writes itself. Walking out of that hotel wasn't just leaving a wedding, it was closing a chapter that had been forced open for 10 years. The family that erased me had to watch me stand taller than ever, and that's the heart of so many family revenge stories, when the people who thought they buried you are forced to see you thrive. This wasn't about shouting or proving them wrong with words, it was about living, building, and showing that the best revenge stories are the ones where you don't just survive, you win. If you enjoy powerful family drama, military twists, and unforgettable family revenge stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment about the moment you felt underestimated and came back stronger. I'd love to hear your story.